Fighting for seats, yes, we have our preferences. We have our favorite seats, even though those are the ones that keep getting broken.
Um, Neither of us think that the Broadway Performance Hall was ever built to show movies. We really, especially for me, since I have a motion sickness problem, I really like to sit far back. And at the Broadway Performance Hall, I like to be sitting maybe over at the Egyptian to watch films at the Broadway Performance Hall. I can't get back far enough, even in the last row, and certainly it just is not a good theater for films, and I don't think those seats are very comfortable. Now, I am definitely in a minority that when they replaced the seats in the Egyptian a few years ago, I do not think that was an improvement because the part that you sit in is too long this direction for me. My legs are too short. So it's a very uncomfortable seat for me, even though the majority think that those were improved seats. The Harvard exit, I actually like their seats when they're not broken. But,
Except in the upstairs theater.
well, yeah, the upstairs is not
They didn't
good.
screen this year upstairs,
Yeah,
which is nice.
yeah. We just ran into Chrissy yesterday at the Puyallup Fair, and at she got married this year and probably is not going to be working as much, and I don't know if she's going to work the festival next year, but she said that one of the reasons they didn't use both the upstairs and downstairs last year is that the festival is too hard on the theater, and you think, oh, come on. But you think about it, how old that building is with all the plumbing and stuff. And of course, when they're using both theaters for the festival, the bathrooms get used twice as much, and um, just simple wear and tear on doors and floors and seats. And apparently it is really hard on that theater. So to sort of protect their theater, since the festival is only a small part of it, they decided to just use the one auditorium. So I don't know if that'll change or not. I like the Harvard exit a lot. I'd hate for us to destroy it through love. So
Have you heard why they moved from the varsity to the Guild 45th? Was there any?
I haven't heard. Have you talked to Ruth Haler?
I have her number, and I think I'm going to call her
She'd,
up.
and I'm sure she'd talk to you,
Yeah.
and she'd be really an interesting person, partly because she's on, she does a lot of the artistic selection because she goes to other festivals, and Daryl has always trusted her judgment. And she works for the Gables chain, so she knows a lot of the ins and outs, and she might know why they switched theaters, so I don't. I'm, sort of neutral. Parking's bad out there no matter where
I
it
think it's
is.
better actually.
At the Guild and the Varsity, yeah.
I find parking just like that.
Yeah.
And I can do the mad dash. Have you ever done the mad dash?
Oh, of course I do. It's easier from the Guild than it was from the Varsity to do the mad dash, because I do the same as you do. I find parking, and I find it so that all I have to do is come up, make a quick ride onto 45th and onto the freeway. So, yeah. I don't know, what theater do you like best?
I would like to make, I don't know, I like the ones with the sounds that I can hear best. The Egyptian sound is awful, as far as I'm concerned.
It's loud.
Well, I have a somewhat of a hearing problem, and it has seemed to me that films are made by directors who are much more concerned with atmosphere than with dialogue. That they really don't care much about what people are saying as long as the street sounds and the background music are there. So I am particularly in favor of those in which I can hear. And I think I hear in the Harvard pretty well, and probably in the Guild, and even the Varsity. Egyptian is awful, but it's much more. It's a matter of the film than it is the theater.
Well, they do have a problem in the Egyptian if there isn't a whole audience, and people often wonder why they can't go sit in the balcony when just under a normal screening or something. They've clearly never been in the balcony when there isn't an audience, because if there isn't a whole full audience on the downstairs floor, the reverberation in the upstairs is unbelievable. So the balcony's only really useful if they're going to fill the downstairs and fill the balcony. The bodies absorb and you don't get that reverberation. I've tried to watch movies when I worked in the office and I wanted to just run out and see a little piece of a movie, and so I'd run out during a screening and I just sit in the balcony and it's like you're in some sort of an echo chamber up there. It's terrible sound. So you really do have to have a full theater before the balcony's even useful to listen in. Otherwise it's very hard. But I think the Egyptian overdrives the sound system. They really crank it up when they maybe don't need to as much. Because I don't have a hearing loss, but sometimes it really bothers me, and it just sounds like it's being overdriven.
So have you met any actors or actresses? You told about me the Monty Hellman stuff with the director.
Oh, there's another great one. It was during the day. There weren't any screenings going on at the Egyptian. I was working in the office, and I stepped outside, and the auditorium lights were up because they were cleaning downstairs. So the whole inside was illuminated, and there was a couple standing behind the seats up in the balcony and just kind of looking down and so on. And I walked out, and the man turned to me and said, when was the theater built? And I stopped and talked for a moment about what the theater was and when we'd started using it and so on. And he and the woman said, well, it's just a beautiful theater, and we really love it. Well, it was John Sayles and Maggie Renzi. They were there for their films, and they had just come in that day on their way to the office. But, you know, when you hear something like that, you know it just really came from the heart, because they have no reason. They just really like that theater.
Well, weren't you asked to show a director around town one time, just spontaneously?
Oh, yeah. One weekend there were, this will happen sometimes, that especially on a weekend, they've booked a lot of films that people from the films are going to be here, directors, producers, actors, and sometimes on the weekends they've booked too many because they need someone with each person or group. I mean, they're visiting here, they're guests of the festival, they need to be taken to restaurants, they need to be taken around to press things, sometimes radio interviews or TV interviews. They have to get to places, and the sense of picking them up and bringing them back. So sometimes if there's lots and lots of people, they'll press any of the employees into service. Can you escort so-and-so to dinner and get him to the theater at such and such a time? And I don't normally do this, but one weekend I did. I took a gentleman who was the director of a film we were showing, a British director. I took him to dinner and then had to get him to the Market Theater in time for his showing. And very nice man. He wanted to have fish, so we went to McCormick's, and I get him to the Market Theater, and he had told me that he was going to meet a friend who lived in Eastern Washington, who was coming over for the screening and was going to meet him, and he'd be arriving soon, and so on. So I'm standing in the lobby of the market talking to this man, waiting for his friend, and his friend comes through the door and is walking towards us, and it's a man I graduated from high school with, in a class of 70 people. And he had never mentioned his name. I mean, no reason he would. He would have no idea that I would know him. So it was really funny. It turned out that my friend has been a screenwriter for several years, and in fact wrote the screenplay for Catalani and Little Britches, and that's how he knew the director. But
anything else, Bill? Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
oh, well, this was fun.
I need to take your picture. Try and get you in my sights.
Let me go get a pillow because these chairs are horribly uncomfortable for a long time sitting on my back. Can't do it.
You talk about seating too.
You're gonna ask me questions?
You ever take whatever, or you could start talking about the Daryl story. You want to tell it? That's not a problem.
What's that?
You said about then you can tell that story if you want, but then you get kicked out smoking. That will warm you up.
Well, what do you want to know? Tell me some things that you want to know.
Ask people how long they've been going to the film festival and
Okay.
how they started going to the film festival and why seeing 50, 60, 70 films in a month as opposed to seeing films like other people do.
Like normal people.
Well, not normal, I'm more.
Right. I started volunteering for the festival in 1981. I came back from Mexico in the spring of '81, and then I heard an ad on KZAM, I think that was the radio station then, saying that the film festival was looking for volunteers, and that was the first year. Should I look at you or the camera?
Yeah, you can look at me or
Okay.
whatever. Yeah.
And that was the first year that they moved from the from the Moore to the Egyptian, so they had both theaters. And so they were looking for volunteers. Okay. And so my partner at the time and I volunteered. And we volunteered to be ushers, and we're working with Debbie, I think, who was the manager then. And it was opening night at the Egyptian. It was Alan Alda's The Four Seasons movie. It was packed. Things got really crazy. He had no tolerance, so he walked home, and I stayed and had a great time. And I remember watching the film on the railing on the left side of the right side of the theater, just sitting on the railing, and that's because that was the only seat left in the house. All the seats were sold out that night. I remember being there early, and I don't remember if it was that night or the next night that I was there early, and there were these two men sitting in the theater smoking, and I didn't know who they were. I mean, nobody had introduced me to them. I didn't know who they were, but I knew that you couldn't smoke in the theaters in Washington State, being a rabid anti-smoker. And I told them that they either had to put the cigarettes out or leave. And later, somebody told me that that was Daryl McDonald and Dan Ireland, the co-founders and directors of the festival. And I said, oh. But they didn't yell at me, and they just looked at me like, who is this weird woman? And that was just, so I volunteered that year. Mostly Fridays and Saturday nights ushering, and then had volunteered until about 87 or 88 when I had an income, and I decided that I was tired of missing all the shorts, all the beginnings, and all the endings, and I bought a pass, and that was an investment. Because I think I became unemployed soon after that. But I just started going to movies. I mean, I really liked going to movies. And when I volunteered for a couple of years, and then for another couple of years, I coordinated the ushers. So I scheduled them, and I supervised and trained and helped them figure out what they were supposed to do. And we moved from the Moore and the Egyptian to the Egyptian, and the Egyptian and the Market Theater, and then the Egyptian and Market for a couple of years, and then the Egyptian and the Broadway and the Harvard Exit for a couple of years. And it just got really crazy. And I missed all the movies that I really wanted to see because they were either at the Market or they were at a different theater when I needed to be there, needed to be somewhere else. And that's when I decided to buy a pass.
So what does an usher do besides show people their seats? Was there any special things that you had to look out for as an usher?
Well, yes. And when I was working with the ushers, and there was a crew of people who all seemed to start at the same time, and we just worked into it, and we had the routine down, and we knew exactly what we were doing. At that time, ushers actively seated people. I mean, actively helped people find seats, moved people over, didn't just stand in the aisles and kind of look around, but actively seated people. We also, after the theater or the film was over, we would move people out, and we did the counting. So we counted folks. So we counted folks in the aisles, in the ramps, and in the lobby. We also ended up going into the restrooms. I mean, at times I had to find a man to go into the restroom to count people because it took people a long time. And if there were only 10 minutes between shows, we had to get people out, in, and counted, or in, out, and counted really quickly. And we got it down really good. We had a good crew. And there were other times when I had to mediate some disputes. I mean, you know, series ticket holders have their seat, and they all know where their seat is. And there were a couple of times when the individual ticket holders got angry that all the seats were taken and would move a sign that the seat was saved, a jacket or something like that, and I had to mediate. I remember there were two stories that I remember, and I can't tell you what the films were.
Yeah, that's okay.
But there were two stories. One, a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, I know you can't do anything about this and it's all over with now, but I just wanted to tell you that there was this guy sitting 2 seats down from me and he had something on top of his head and it was dripping down and it was really weird. And he also, I think the movie may have been one of those unrated foreign films with lots of sex, and apparently he took his penis out and was playing with himself.
Oh.
And I said, you're right, there's absolutely nothing I can do about it now because we don't know who this guy is, but I am sorry that happened. And she just accepted the apology, and we both knew there was nothing we could do, but you know, that happens. And another time, somebody brought chicken wings in, and he meticulously ate every piece of meat off those chicken wings. Wasn't any louder than somebody eating popcorn, but it was just, she got intrigued by watching him eat these chicken wings. So those were two stories that I remember. So, you know, there were times when we just had to do a lot of customer service. I mean, people would ask us or tell us when things were going wrong because we were the folks that they identified with the theater. They didn't as much identify the box office people or the ticket taker or even the theater manager, but it was us. We got the anger when the whole block of seats in the center section of the Egyptian was saved for some corporate sponsors for a movie, and we had to just carefully explain to people that who was coming and things like that.
It's interesting because I think Roxer, Steve was saying that they actually played X-rated movies at the festival, and I couldn't believe that.
Oh yeah, one of the Midnight series in '81 or '82 was all realm of the senses and things like that. Yeah. So it was a lot of unrated or X-rated movies. I mean, even one of the years they were playing they played a bunch of punk rock movies at midnight. So they were all midnight films.
So it wasn't something the kids could walk in on or something?
No. I mean, it was conscious. They were midnight films. I'm guessing that whoever sold the tickets were careful as to who they sold tickets to, but I don't know if they carded anybody.
So how did you get into foreign film as opposed, I mean, why foreign film and why, as many of the foreign films that you see when you become a pass holder? What's the difference between that and just going to the multiplexes?
Well, what I tell people about the 3 weeks that I spend at the festival is that I get to travel all around the world and then come home and sleep in my own bed. I get to see cultures and glimpses of people that I would probably never get to see. I mean, I don't have a lot of money. I don't foresee myself being able to do a lot of traveling. I've been to Mexico and Central and South America. But I've never been to Europe. I've never been to Asia. I mean, these are countries that I don't know, and I think it's important that we learn about other cultures, and film is one way to do that. Especially the small independent films is a way to do that. I think we get more out of those, a better glimpse into a culture from those films than we do from the Jackie Chan or the John Woo films, the shoot 'em up bang bangs, which are always fun and entertaining, but they easily cross boundaries. But to see, I'm lousy with titles, but to see a Japanese film right after, or during the occupation after World War II, and see how baseball brought two warring cultures together was just a real delight to see that, to see the different African films. I mean, I only speak, two languages, and one of them not well, and I don't foresee being able to speak a whole lot of other languages, so that the subtitles give me the glimpse into those worlds.
When did you find yourself meeting other full series pass holders? Did it take years? Some people would say it took several years even to talk to other people in the movies.
Well, I had an advantage because I had to count them. So I may not have known names, but I knew faces right off, because I would recognize, at least by the second week, I would recognize people who were pass holders because they were always there. And so I would recognize faces, and one of the ways to make the counting easy is to make it into a joke or to make it into a game. And so it was always fun to do the counting. I mean, the way to take the embarrassment off when you walk into the restroom is I said, okay, how many people in the stalls have have passes? I do. I mean, I wasn't going to go in and look, but it was making it into a game. So I got to recognize faces, and I'm always bad with names. So there are even people today that I've known for 5 or 6 years that 3 weeks after the festival ends, I can't remember their name. And 2 weeks into the festival beginning, I still don't remember their name, but I remember their face. I remember things about them, but I...
That's all we have this in the booklet.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I probably had an advantage of getting to know people, at least by sight and visiting with them, because I was there and they were there.
What else are people? I guess you can say whatever else, anything else you want to say or anything. If there's anything else you can think about ushering, or anything about any specific audience reaction to any film. You don't have to give me specific titles, or because a couple people told me this might have been before your time about the lesbian riot or something.
Oh yes, I was there.
Oh, you?
I was there.
You can tell your version.
It was an awful movie. It was an Italian film. And it was one of the few lesbian films I think that ever were being made. This was 81, no later than 82, okay? And it was a male version of what a male, it was a film. Let me figure out how to say this, and you'll edit all this stuff out good. It was a film probably by a male director, kind of what a male image would be of a lesbian relationship. Okay, and the dyke stole the woman from her husband where she belonged and ran off. And I mean, it was really bad. It was badly made. And it was just, the story was bad, and the women hated it. The women hated it, and they came out and confronted Darryl. I'm not sure he needed to have refunded their money. I think he did it to protect theater. But there have been other films that have been just as bad that people hate and walk out on that they don't get a refund. But I think he got bullied into refunding the money. Yeah, it was fun. I just stood in the back, kind of off to the side, and watched. And he took their arguments and tried to make the argument that this was a film festival, that we don't guarantee the quality or the political correctness of any film or the content of any film, and this was one filmmaker's view of the world, and they hated it. Another incident that I remember also in 81 or 82, it was during one of the punk rock movies, that Debbie asked my friend and I to stay late, because the movie had played the night before at the Moore, and apparently some kids had ripped the sinks off the wall. We said, okay, we'll get them in, we'll stay to the end of the movie just to make sure that nothing happened. Well, during the course of the film, somebody came out of the women's restroom and told us that there were two people making love on the floor. We weren't going to stop them. We just kind of warned women as they went into the restroom that they might find a couple on the floor kind of screwing around. And they went in, looked, and came back out and said, "You're right, there was somebody in." But we decided that we would probably create more problems if we stopped them than if we just warned people. And it was during one of the punk rock movies, and it seemed appropriate behavior for a punk rock movie, and maybe not appropriate for the Egyptian, but we didn't think we could stop it very easily.
Do you have any director encounters or actor encounters that you run into by accident or?
I remember when Tony Perkins came, he was so shy. I mean, he was almost embarrassed by all the people who wanted his autograph and wanted to talk to him or ask questions. I mean, it was really nice and almost embarrassing because he was so shy. Dennis Hopper stood on the wing outside the theater, outside the auditorium, and smoked cigarettes during his entire production. I ended up asking him not to smoke because people were complaining that they couldn't breathe in the theater. There was so much smoke going on. One of the festival goers, when Rutger Hauer was there, and we all had, he was a heartthrob, and when he came, she came back to me and said, "He's so short." And, I still thought he was a good-looking man. Monique van der Ven has always been a festival favorite. And I have no idea what happened to her, but she's disappeared for the last 8 or 9 years. But she was always a festival favorite. I remember driving one of the Dutch directors, I can't remember his name, to the airport one afternoon, and we just had a wonderful conversation about movies and what he wanted to accomplish and things on the way to the airport. And he liked my beat-up old Volkswagen bus, which is what I had at the time.
Have you ever done any of the Secret Film Festival films?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to tell a title.
I can't tell you
I know that, but any incidences from the Secret Film Festival that you remember? Or what, pretty sedate audiences? Well,
never sedate audiences, but very busy, active audiences. I didn't always go to the Secrets, and I know that there were a couple of films that I heard about later that I shouldn't have heard about later, but I was sorry that I missed. And still regret that I missed a couple of films that will never get an opening. But The Secret has its diehard. I remember I never had to get there that early to get a seat, but I remember seeing people there at 8 o'clock in the morning with their chairs and their coffee and their breakfast rolls and their Sunday paper and a blanket if necessary, just kind of curled up, sitting there waiting online. And I just never wanted to get up that early for a seat or to fight that hard for a seat. So I don't do The Secret anymore.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I guess you could talk about the evolution of the buttons that Steve, I guess Steve said he started out with buttons because of you needed something for ushers.
Mm-hmm. The early buttons, we needed something to identify ushers, and it's also something that we could give ushers, the volunteers, something. In the early years, volunteers actually got a t-shirt and or a sweatshirt, and I have some of those t-shirts still in sweatshirts, mostly t-shirts. And so we were able to give volunteers the t-shirt, and we wore them when we were working, and we were also wearing buttons when we were working. And Steve has just been there. I mean, he's one of the first people I met making buttons for us all, and it's just been wonderful. So I prize my collection of buttons. Yeah.
Remember some of the passwords that I passed on? I think someone mentioned, David Bumbar.
There's two. There's David and Jerry. David taught English as a second language up at Edmonds Community College, and he died so incredibly suddenly. The festival ended, and then a month later he was dead. 2 months later he was dead. I mean, it was just very quick and a real shock. David had this wonderful apartment down below Broadway in one of those old, really nice brick buildings, and he had kaleidoscopes. He had lots of kaleidoscopes, wonderful kaleidoscopes in it that he collected, and they were just wonderful. I still miss him. And Jerry was one of those computer wonks over at Hanford, and would just come over, would leave his garden and his house and his job and his girlfriend and come over for the month and either stay with his son or take an apartment for the month, and just round and jolly and friendly. And yeah, and then there's a couple of others who just don't come around anymore. Stan don't think Stan ever bought a ticket, but he was a volunteer. I remember I think he started the same year I did, or the next year, and he was a volunteer and was really good working with people, and then he just went on to do other things. Norman was a series ticket holder for a long time and then became a volunteer and has moved on to do other things. Those are two people that I think.
Anything else you want to say, or that's pretty much what you can think of saying?
Have you talked to Kathy and Darcy and those folks?
No, I'm going to talk to Larry Glickman tomorrow.
Okay, you should talk to Kathy and to Chrissy and to Darcy and to Craig. Those are people that you should talk to. I remember when Darcy and Chrissy, you know who they are.
Are they managers now?
They're the twins.
Oh.
They're the twins. Kathy, I think, is just leaving the Harvard Exit as manager.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm not sure where Chris is in school. Chris is in school. And Darcy worked for the public library, but I remember when they first started, they were 16. Legally they were 16. They may have been 15, but they were 16, and it's been a joy knowing them. I mean, they would work behind the concession stand. That's where they worked. They worked the concession stand, and they made the popcorn and served the sodas while Craig made the coffees. And I sound old thinking about them.
That's okay. I think Steve showed me pictures. He said he's just gonna, we might have like a big party and just have his albums out. And then, because it worked really well when Rox and Paul and Steve were there, and they just started feeding off each other, and they just jumped in right there. So yeah. I might do that. I mean, you told some really good stories. I mean, I really appreciate you doing this.
Sure. I mean, I remember when Darcy and Chris dropped out of high school, and we gave them such shit. We gave them such static for dropping out of high school. I mean, and they said, well, I know, and they didn't like high school, and I mean, they were 17 or something like that. And then when they went back, we gave them a whole lot more support for being back. And then Chris was going to, I think you should confirm this with them, I think she went to high school, she finished high school over on the east side. She took Darcy to her prom. So Chris had the gown and Darcy had the tux, and they looked great. They looked great. Another story I remember is during one of the NBA playoffs. This happened, I guess, 3 different times during NBA playoffs. One time I remember standing in line, and there were a number of people with their small TVs, their pocket TVs. They were standing in line watching the basketball game, giving information to everybody. The last time the Sonics were in the playoffs, people would run to Bill's or the Deluxe or someplace in between shows to get the scores. And I remember one particularly critical game, somebody kept their earphones on to listen to the game while the movie was going. And we had this code so that if the Sonics won, they would just put their finger up, and thumbs up kind of thing. And so they did that but none of us could cheer because it was in the middle of this movie. But it's this kind of dual loyalty of the movies don't get in the way, but they do get in the way of other lives. People complaining when family comes to town during the film festival. I mean, things just don't happen. I mean, I take 3 weeks off vacation time and people know where to find me. And that's the only place to find me.
I've heard of operations being postponed, that's what people told me.
Oh yeah. Steve postponed an operation until after the film festival. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there are 49 other weeks in the year to do those things. This is when you indulge yourself, and you really get to do it.
Good.
What else can I tell you?
That's it. I mean, I appreciate it. I'm going to take your picture and have you sign my guest book. I'll just stop. So I guess, I ask everyone how they started out going to the festival, how they began with foreign film.
Oh, you mean it's going now?
Yeah, you can say anything you want to say.
Oh, well, I went to the film festival downtown at the Moore Egyptian Theater, the Moore Theater it was. And I was running a parking lot downtown, and so we went down there and saw all the movies because I liked seeing movies with subtitles in foreign languages, because I liked to study languages at the time.
So what languages did you study that went with the films that you saw?
I was interested in the Italian, the French, the Swedish, the Japanese. I think I was studying Chinese at the time. And Spanish, and so all of them, I just enjoyed this. That's one reason I went to those, because of the languages.
So how did you get to the point where you ended up seeing 50 or 60 movies as opposed to just seeing, maybe a dozen or so like most people see?
Well, because in the early years, they only had a dozen or so, as I remember. So you could see all of them. And then we would visit in the lobby of the Moore Theater. And then they increased the number of movies over the years. And it just gradually happened that there were more and more movies. So I think we just got used to it.
So you built up from there. So what were the early years of the festival like? I heard it was a lot more wild or something, and they showed movies all night sometimes for some people.
The reason I remember it being wild is because the way the Moore Theater was, it had a huge balcony. So if they had a movie which a lot of people were coming to, they would open up this balcony and it would fill up way to the rafters. And sometimes those were the days of feminism, and so many of these women were unhappy if anything about feminism or women was not according to their ideology in the movie. So there would be this happened over the years, that they began to hiss, and they would storm out of the theater. Now the hissing has gone away. Again, in the late 90s, feminism seems to be subsiding. But the disapproval, sometimes when people were shocked at certain violence or sexual things, they would storm out of the theater. So this was a lot of fun to watch this. Because a lot of people, they take a movie as reality when they forget that it isn't.
Do you remember any specific incidences where films outraged people or anything? You can look through catalogs if you have.
Oh yeah, the specific ones. I remember the Pasolini movie Salo would have large numbers of people walking out at different scenes that were particularly disgusting. And I remember one where the violence was so real. This was more recently at the Egyptian Theater. They would walk out. Those are what was the name of that movie?
Which?
Where they had him in a garage. They'd kidnapped people and they were cutting the guy's, what were they cutting? His ear off or something?
That wasn't Reservoir Dogs. I don't think
Yeah, Reservoir Dogs, yeah.
Was that a festival movie?
I think so. Maybe it was a secret festival.
It might have been. Well, since you brought that up, I know we can't mention titles, but there's were there any secret film festival incidences that you can?
That's the only one I remember for that.
And so, have you ever? What was I going to ask you about? Have you ever done the poster auction or anything?
No, the poster auction is for me just an opportunity to take portraits of people, because I like to take portraits of people who attend the film festival, and I like to stand them in front of a poster and take their portrait. So I've done this for years.
So how'd you start doing that? Do you have an album of that, or how did you start? Did you start saying, I want to have pictures of people?
Oh, I remember then. That's right. Then we started having, in the early years, I would invite a few people to come to my house after the film festival to have a little film festival party, and I would take their picture and write their phone number on the back of the picture so I could call them up. And then the parties, I had them here for a couple years, and then I think Jeff Botten started having them at his house. And then Maxine took them over after that.
So how did the camaraderie of the full series Passover start? How did the party start? You just said, oh, you just want to start seeing people and talk to people, or after films? Or?
Yeah, because after a few years we started becoming very good friends. So some of my oldest friends are from people I've known from the film festival, because I was just looking, it started in 1976, so it's already over 20 years. And there's several people one woman, Barbara, who I know from the very beginning, we actually took a trip to Rome together one year. That was quite a wild trip. And a few other people have become good friends, so we would like to see each other after the movies end.
She's the one that drives a Volkswagen, Federal Lust.
She's had the same Volkswagen from the beginning. She drives in from Snohomish, where she lives on a farm, and seems to remember the plots of every movie in detail, of these hundreds and hundreds of movies, which I don't remember the plots, but sometimes they come back to me if someone talks about the movie or something.
So how do you choose the movies that you see when there's so many movies to choose from at this festival? Like there's, I guess, close to 200 movies, and you can't possibly see them all. How do you select?
I choose them by country. This is what I always do. I want to see a few from each country. I used to choose sometimes by directors. When back in the 70s, 80s, it was the age of the great directors, Italian, French, Swedish. But now it's sort of, they don't seem to have this as much anymore. But we used to choose them by directors or by country.
Have you ever had any conversations with directors or actors during a festival, or?
This I haven't been as interested in. I'll sometimes listen when they bring the directors after the movie, they'll talk, but I'm not as interested in that as the movies themselves. In the question periods after the movies over the years, the same questions are asked over and over and over, like, how much did it cost to make this movie, and how did you finance your independent movie, and how did you, things like this. But so it tends to be a little repetitive.
So does that bother you, some of the questions they ask, or you just think it's naivete or something?
No, it's interesting, because you see you get sort of what people are thinking about in the city in that year. So there's also different political trends that pass through, and of course the feminism is by far the main one over these couple of decades. And so it's interesting to see what people are like from the questions they ask.
So So how do you select your seat? I heard that you don't get your seat until like literally 5 minutes before the movie starts. So I guess it doesn't really matter to you where you sit.
Well, this is very important. No, the seats. People that go to the film festival take their seats very seriously. I don't remember, in the Moore Theater, it wasn't as, I always would sit in the back on the main floor, and in the Egyptian also. I have to be in the back on the main floor, and I would have to be on the right side. So we usually sit in the same place with the same people around us year after year, and this is a comforting thing, I guess. And I don't like to sit down and wait for a movie to start, since I'm seeing many of them, so I'll walk around visiting with people until the movie starts, and then go to my seat.
So what do you talk about during them? I heard I think Gene was saying that sometimes you talk during movies, so what do you talk about during?
This is another issue, talking during movies. Now in Seattle, in so-called art films, this has been the tradition. Going to see an art film is sort of like going to church for Seattleites. This replaces going to the church, and in churches apparently people don't talk during the service, so you're not supposed to talk during the movie. And I've learned not to talk during the movie, but I have occasionally, if the movie is particularly bad, sometimes can't help making a few comments, and I will get shushed. Now, shushing is a Seattle tradition. You turn around and shush the person behind you. If you go to movies in the suburbs, of course, you can talk during the movies, but not in high-class movies, which these are supposed to be. So I have a theory about movie-going as replacing church-going for many people, which is perfectly okay. And if this is the tradition, I have to respect this.
So explain your theory about movie-going in Seattle replacing church-going. The movie stars sort of replace the gods of ancient times, and our movie stars are gods of the modern world, and so people worship them. They want to know all about their lives, and they know all about them. For me, I don't know so much about the actors, and so I don't remember their names as much, because I'm more interested in the foreign films. But the American films have these godlike, beautiful people in them, and people worship them like the Greek gods and things, and so that's a thing. You have to respect them, because they get very annoyed if you disturb their worship when you're sitting behind them. I always tell them, I thought if they wanted to be quiet when they're seeing the movie, they should watch it at home on a video, but they tell me no, it's supposed to be there, so I have. Now Barbara, who I sit next to often, loves to talk. She will talk until the movie actually starts, but then she'll stop when it starts. But some people sitting will shush you even before the movie started, because they're already worried that you're going to talk during the movie. So I find it quite amusing. However, people get very tired and irritated toward the end of the film festival, and little fights will break out over seats and other little things. And so sometimes there's little bits of anger will break out toward the end. And so if you do want to provoke a person, it's very easy to just make a comment during a movie. It works pretty well. So have you ever got to any fights over a seat that you want to sit in and someone else is sitting in your seat, or?
I don't worry. No, the seats, to me, it's not important. But I sometimes I'll just take any seat at the end. I don't mind. But some people do. They take their seat very seriously.
Does your seating preference change in the different theaters? I know we have the Broadway Performance and the Harvard Exit, or they're pretty much the same. You always sit near the rear.
Yeah, there's two types. Well, there's the people who have to sit in the front, many of whom I like talk to before the movie, and then there's the others who like to sit in the back. And this seems to be very important. For me, I want to be in the back, I think, because it makes me sort of dizzy if I'm too close to see. You can't see the whole screen.
Do you have any theories about the people that sit in the front seaters, or have they told you why they like sitting?
Yeah, the people who sit in the front want that total experience, to be immersed in that movie, and they say, I think they feel like they're right inside that movie. So.
I guess over the years, some of the pass holders have passed away. Do you remember any? I think someone mentions like David Bombard.
That's right.
Do you know any? Can you say anything about? Some
Well, David was a friend of mine, so yeah.
Can you say a little about what he was like, or any of his quirks? Or?
He was one. There are also two types of people that see the movies. There are those who criticize the movies and those who don't criticize the movies. He was one who didn't criticize them. He always liked the movies and always had good things to say about them. So remember that about him. He taught English as second language at Edmonds Community College, so he had traveled a lot, and then other people like to criticize the movies. One guy, Phil, always criticized, he had to sit right in front and he criticized every movie. That was fun, because it's sort of fun to hear people.
So what's your take on movies? I mean, because sometimes you find things in movies that people think are horrible, and you find, you know, like a movie like Viva l'Amour, a movie like The River. Some people think the movies are just horrible, and then you tell me that you find some enjoyment.
Oh, The River,
Some of those movies.
Yeah, so this is also, oh, that's right. So over the years, you would think, since I know that many of these people quite well from years and years, that you could predict which movie they're going to like and which one they're not, but you cannot. You just can never predict. And so often I'll like movies that most of the people hated, or vice versa, and it's really hard to predict. You just don't know what one. But often if it's a political movie that gives a political slant that the people like, they'll like that movie. So sometimes that can be a predictor of it. But often I tend not to like preachy movies, so often I won't like those and other people will. But movies that are very original and unique, I tend to like them if they have a unique style I never saw before, which was apparently the one from Taiwan that was called The River. It was one, but there's a lot of them like that you never will see them again, and so that happens a lot.
Is there anything you want to show into the catalogs or anything?
So I have my collection of all the film catalogs from the beginning of the film festival, and here's the first one, the first Seattle Film Festival. And this is now a collector's item.
I don't think even Darryl has a first year's program.
I don't know, they had to photocopy this, so.
Oh, they copied it from you so they could have it?
Yeah, they copied this. And it's also a matter of memory. It makes you think about memory, what we remember. It's really a mystery, because if you look at some of these, some I can't even remember if I saw them or not, and some I'll remember that I saw them, but don't remember the plot. It's interesting how our mind works, and whether remembering the movies is all that important. Maybe it isn't.
So what are some of your survival strategies for the festival, knowing that it's about 3 or 4 weeks long and you have to eat and you have to sleep? Do you have any special regimens you go through?
Yeah, I think I do. I take it for granted now. It's actually not that strenuous for me. I don't live that far from the movies, so I'm not traveling back and forth too long, and it's relaxing. You're sitting there resting, basically, so you don't really get overtired. It's just by the end, though, you can get irritated because you have an overload of information, probably, and images. But I think our mind just discards them automatically, so I don't have too much trouble with it. I don't, though, go to movies Usually in the summer after the film festival, I don't go to any movies because I've been overloaded.
Are there any incidents that you can remember between about your fellow pass holders? I mean, talking in line or anything, or any flubs in there?
This is another unusual thing, is that people, some of them love to wait in line. They get there early and they wait in line, which I never could understand because we can just go in with our pass. So some of them, though, they like to be there in line and keep their place in line. I think because they're looking for a certain seat. If they get in there early enough, they get the seat they want. And but I like to go visit with the people as they're standing in line, although I don't stand in line myself. And also for me, where you sit, for me the most important thing is to not sit in the middle of the theater where there's people in front of you and you have to look over their heads. I like to sit on the edges where you don't have that problem. Some people though want to be right in the middle, and they don't mind the people in front of them and all the heads. So I think they like to be right in the middle because they like to be right in the middle of things.
Anything else you want to share with us about the film festival through the early years, or just through the evolution of 20 plus years, how you've seen it change, the kind of audiences that have been attracted?
I'm thinking what the biggest change is that when I used to go, for years and years, I would see friends of my parents would come to the movies. I'd visit with friends of my parents over there. But so many years have gone by that the friends of my parents are now in their 80s and they don't go to the movies anymore. And so now everybody goes to the movies. Most of them are younger than me. So we're thinking about by the 40th or 50th film festival, when we're in our 80s, we might have to take taxis back and forth to the festival.
So I think you mentioned that you knew Eric way back when he was a lot younger when you knew him or something.
Eric, yeah.
Was he in his early 20s when he started going to the festival? Was he younger than that, or?
Probably. A lot of these people have not been getting any younger after 22 years or whatever. But I would think that the people who have gone to the festival from the beginning, though, they're not going to stop going just because they got old. As friends of my parents, that's not as important a thing for them. They'll stay on, but I would think that in another 20, 30 years, these people are going to be, they're going to have a lot of quite elderly people going to the film festival.
With oxygen.
Yeah.
So when do you start going to movies again? I mean, I know you said you don't go to movies in the summer. When do you start going to movies again? In the fall or something? Yeah,
the fall. So now it's September. I'll probably start going again. But we get other interests over the years. I used to go to at least 2 movies a week, probably all year, but I don't anymore. The last couple of years, I have other interests and things. But
so who are some of the other 20-year people that I should talk to? I mean, I talked to Steve, Rox, and Paul, and Gene, and Max, and...
You have to talk to Barbara. Barbara has gone from the very beginning, and she is very interesting.
Okay, well...
She is also ageless. No one knows how old she is. She has... I don't know, but she is probably the oldest person I think who's gone from the very beginning.
Yeah, if you well, you can pass my thing on to her. You have my letter. If you want to pass it on to her, or if you give me an address and a number, I'll mail it to her. Either way. You don't think she'd mind or anything if I sent that to her?
And then I could tell. So I got this theory about the worshiping at the movies actually from Camille Paglia. If you want to read in Camille Paglia, she explains how this her theory about our religious experiences at the movies.
So Is it a religious experience for you at the movies, or you just enjoy yourself?
I'm not sure for me, somewhat I'm sure, but I'm not as interested in the movie stars and the American movies as much, although some of them I really enjoy, because I had different motivation. I like going to see, oh yeah, I call it armchair travel, because I traveled a lot, and this is a lot easier to sit there, travel from country to country without having to really go there. So that's one of my motivations. But another, I'm sure, is the worship. See, because you're getting all these ideas from the movies about the meaning, what's the meaning of life, and what is right and wrong, morality. All these things are what the movies are dealing with, and these are the same things that are dealt with in any religion. So many of the movies are very profound. They deal with very profound ideas, and so that's a way that we think about these things. So in a way it's a way you look forward to once a year, having this intense experiences on basically what is life all about and what's the meaning of existence, because that's what the good movies are dealing with. So I think that's an important aspect of it.
Okay. Like I'll have you sign my guest book, and then I'll take your picture. I'm going to show you my guest book.